Hi, I'm Linda Abraham, President and Founder of Accepted. I'm presenting today's webinar, the 5-part framework for a successful medical school application. A couple of housekeeping items before we start. I will announce a special for webinar attendees only at the end of the webinar, so stay tuned. You'll need the coupon code, and that's the only way to get it, is to get it at during the webinar, or it'll end up being at the end. We will also have a contest towards the end of the webinar, but before the coupon code, and that will be based solely on the content presented during the webinar. So again, stay tuned and you could win. Finally, if you have not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so, and I recommend actually printing it out. You'll find it on your control panel under the handout section, 5-part framework worksheet.pdf. Please feel free again to I would recommend that you print it out and take notes on it. Use it for taking notes, but you can use the back of it if you prefer for whatever you want. I'd like to learn a little bit about you before I dive into the content that I intend to present. So if you could tell me where you're located, city and state, I would very much appreciate that. City and state in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. All right, we have Houston, Texas, New York City, Virginia, Toronto, Canada, Clinton, Massachusetts, Los Angeles. All right, I have a neighbor here. I'm in Los Angeles also. Lansing, Michigan, College Station, Texas, Ottawa, Canada. A couple of Canadians. Good. Boston, Massachusetts. Are you still snow-covered there? Los Altos, California, Detroit, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, New Jersey, Virginia, Davis, okay. Mississauga, Canada. University Park, did I pronounce Mississauga okay? And South Florida, where it's nice and warm. Anybody else want to provide? HB, California, I'm not quite sure where that is. Toronto, Chicago, Fredericksburg, Virginia. Okay, really nice cross-section, mostly North American. California, Queens, New York, welcome. Welcome from near and far. Okay. I also would like to learn a little bit about where you're at in the application process. So I'm going to launch a poll. And I'd like you to choose all the options that apply to you. Okay, you can choose more than one. The options are applied in the 2016 cycle, preparing for a 2017 application, preparing for 2018 or later. Okay. And we have 65% having voted. Can we get it up? I have some definite winners among the options, but I'd like to get it up a little higher. Again, the options are applied in the 2016 cycle, preparing for 2017 application, preparing for 2018 or later, and you can choose more than one option if you applied previously. We have 75% voting. I'd like to get it up over 80 if possible. I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we got 77%. I'll make do with that. And here are the results. 9% applied previously in the 2016 cycle, so the overwhelming majority of you are first-time applicants. 71% are preparing for the 2018 application, and 38% are preparing for 2018 or later. I'm surprised we don't have more reapplicants here, but I kind of anticipated that kind of split between the 2017 and 2018. All right, the next question, this will be the last one before we get moving on, is, and this is just a follow-up on the first one, how many of you are first-time applicants and how many of you are reapplicants? All right, okay. How many of you are first-time applicants? How many of you are reapplicants? We have 73% voting, 75%. Can we get it up over 80 this time? It's a real simple question. How many of you are first-time applicants? How many of you are reapplicants? 5, 4, come on, somebody else vote. 3, 2, 1, good. Okay, we got it up to 77% again. 70% are first-time applicants and 30% are reapplicants. Okay. Well, now that I know a little bit about you, it'll help me in responding to questions later on and also in some of the content for today. I got a call several weeks ago from someone, let's call him Joe, who wanted to go to medical school. He wanted to attend an allopathic medical school in the United States, preferably in his home state. He wanted my opinion as to his chances and how my company, Accepted, could help him. And he said, please be honest. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. I assured him I would be honest and candid, though I do usually have some concern for people's feelings. He had a 3.2 GPA overall. His science GPA was a 2.9 from a decent state school, but not Ivy League. He had a 495 MCAT, and his clinical exposure was a summer of volunteering in a local ER, plus shadowing the family physician for a week. He was a bio major. His community service consisted of a couple of volunteer gigs at Habitat for Humanity. And he emphasized that he wanted U.S. allopathic schools. I explained to him what I think he needed to do to become competitive at U.S. allopathic schools, which are very hard to get into. And the conversation I had with him was like that I've had with hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants before him, and sometimes their parents. He was basically asking me how to get accepted to medical school. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. Whilst we discuss it, well, I'm going to focus very much on what you should be doing. I'm also going to give a few suggestions as what you should not be doing. I'm going to issue some caveats and warnings along the way. One of the things you should not be doing is wishing that you're suddenly going to get a magic wand and that it's going to get you in. That will not work. A dab of makeup won't do it. Trust me, I've used that. It doesn't work either. Spin won't work either. I like to play ping pong, believe it or not, and I know what spin is. That will not work either. Med school admissions isn't ping pong. What you need to do is submit a substantive competitive application. And by that, I mean you need to present competitive qualifications effectively. You need to present competitive qualifications effectively. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong at the med schools you are applying to. And if you do that successfully, if you present that competitive application in a strong presentation of your qualifications, then they will want to accept you. My goal for this webinar is to show you that a successful medical application has to have each of the 5 elements I'm going to present. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, all 5. So let's dive into those 5 elements. The first one, you need to demonstrate that you can do the work in medical school. Now, I'd like you in the question window, we're going to use the question window for your answers as well as your questions, to indicate how you intend to show you can do the work of medical school. Okay, Malik, GPA and MCAT. That's the best way. Through my transcript, completing the prereqs with good grades. Excellent, Trish. Through the transcript, okay. Grades and course load. Yep, you guys got it. It's the academics. Through volunteering experience that's relevant. We'll get to that in a minute, Vicki. Okay. Okay, good. Good. The easiest way, as most of you said, is through your transcript and test score, the MCAT. And that is presented in the primary application that you're going to send in, whether it's the MCAS, the ACOMAS, or the TMD-SAS. Ideally, you want to be at or above average for accepted students in both grades and test scores. If not, how can you convince schools to accept you with below average? Let's talk about grades for the moment. Realize that averages are what they are because some were accepted with below average stats. However, the farther away you are below that average, and if both your grades and MCAT are below average, the harder it is and the less likely it is that you can effectively demonstrate you can do the work required in medical school. So what if you have, for example, below average grades, and we'll get the test score also, but let's say even below average MCAT also. Probably the best thing you can do, certainly one of the better things you can do, is consider a post-bac program. And we have all kinds of resources on Accepted that you can use if you are considering a post-bac program or do have below average stats. These are the first 2 are more resources on how-to kind of resources. The last one, this one here, is a podcast interview that I did for our podcast Administration Straight Talk, and absolutely inspiring story of somebody who had a lot of challenges along the way, went to a post-bac program, got into medical school after being rejected several times, and is now an orthopedic surgery resident. So it's one of the hardest residencies to get into. So again, the first two are more how-tos, and this is more of an inspirational story. And it's really an amazing story. I strongly recommend it to anybody who's getting discouraged about their own stats. Now, if your science grades are below average, then you're going to want to consider that post-bac program. Another way to deal with somewhat lower grades is with a high test score, because a high test score can mitigate below average grades, especially if you're combining that high test score with evidence that you know how to apply yourself academically and context for the low grades. So for U.S. allopathic schools, you ideally want to be at 508 or more. A 508 doesn't guarantee acceptance, and below 508 doesn't guarantee rejection, but that is a good score to aim for. And again, if you get less, then you deal with the consequences. If you're not sure whether to retake, if let's say you got a 501, 502, 504, 505, then you may want to look at this chart here, because it combines, and you can translate the new scale to the old scale and see people in this yellow area with these stats had more than a 50% chance of getting accepted. If you're below these stats, then, well, you may want to consider retaking. But you're 100% right, those of you who said that in order to show you can do the work, it's that evidence is generally seen in the transcript and test score, the objective elements of the application. Now, my friend Joe, he couldn't make this case. He couldn't show that he could do the work. His GPA and his MCAT were significantly below average, especially the MCAT. And his science grade was also below average. So he had some work to do on that score. That's part one of the framework. Part two, show that you know what clinical practice is, have a realistic idea of what you're getting into, and perhaps have some direction within medicine. Now again, how are you going to do that? In the question window, I'd like to see your thoughts. Shadowing, clinical work experience. Ryan, I like that a lot better. Volunteer work, okay. Shadowing is a good introduction to medicine. Alicia McNeese-Namonkar, former postbac director at UC Davis and accepted consultant, makes the point very, very effectively that shadowing is something that helps only one person, you. It doesn't help the doctor, doesn't help the patient. You're entirely passive. You're an observer. And it's not the best form of clinical exposure. EMT programs are excellent. Research experience, only if it's clinical research, will really show that you know what you're getting into. Working in a clinical area, yes, Teresa, that works. Volunteering in a clinic, yes. Volunteering in a hospital clinic, yes. Scribing, Ruthvi, that is gold. Medical interpreters, yes. Medical assisting, yes, depending upon what you're doing, but yes. Clinical work experience, okay. Yeah, working as a clinical technician, obviously you know what you're getting into, okay? That would work. Hospice volunteer, absolutely. So what I'm trying to say here is that if shadowing gives you an introduction to medicine, but it's a passive introduction, and what you need to do is go beyond that. Become the ENT, become the scribe, do volunteer in a clinical setting so that you know more, you're used to the clinical setting, and you can write based on experience about what you've done and your interest in medicine. And Joe couldn't do that on our call. He did have some clinical exposure, but frankly, compared to most people applying to medical school, if you recall, it was one summer volunteering in the ER and shadowing the family physician for a week. It was weak. It wasn't terribly competitive. Medical schools want to admit people who have a realistic idea of medicine and who are committed to the field. If your commitment is based on the latest TV show or, like I said, a week or two of shadowing, it's not very impressive and it's not real. It must be based on experience in clinical settings. They don't want to admit somebody who's going to be so squeamish that you can't function at the sight of blood. They want to admit people who are realistic about the hours and demands and the emotional demands of medicine. You need to understand that not all patients are nice and not all outcomes are good. And you need to be able to, they want to believe that you're going to be able to handle the workload, the emotional strain, and the sheer hard work that medicine requires. And the other thing that's, again, part of this, knowing, having a realistic idea of medicine, it's not mandatory in tremendous detail, but if you have some direction in terms of your educational needs and your post-medical school plans, that's a plus. Many secondaries will ask you why you want to attend their school. Have you thought about the kind of education you want to have? Do you want a systems-based, problems-based, traditional, highly innovative? I mean, what's important to you in a medical school? Are you more interested in primary care or specialties ultimately? Do your areas of interest match the school's focus and strengths? This is going to be really important when you get to secondaries. Urban versus rural medicine, primary care versus specialties, research versus a clinical focus. Are you interested in a specific specialty that the school perhaps places really well in? Now, nobody asks you to sign on the dotted line regarding your post-medical school interests or your residencies, but if you do have direction, especially, again, I don't know how specific you want to be, then that should inform your choice of schools. So keep that in mind, and that realism will come out in your essays, in the primary application, in the secondaries, letters of recommendation, and of course in interviews. So the first part of the framework is show them you can do the work. The second is reveal a realistic understanding of medical practice. 3, show that you share the school's values and its missions. In other words, you need to show fit. How are you going to show fit? How do you go about that? In the question window, please. Anybody want to take a guess? Take a stab at it? How are you going to show fit? Okay, Teresa, try to understand their mission and how you can fit it. Exactly. Bingo, you got it. Work activities that you've done through your personal statement, through extracurriculars, research the school. Okay, what is the school known for? Exactly. Ryan, again, good. A lot of people miss that part of this. Look at how your extracurriculars align with their mission statement. Excellent, Trish. Through your activities and secondaries, Leslie, that's good, but obviously you have to first understand what the school values. And I think that's what your other participants here are getting very, very well. How will this school help you grow as a doctor? It's not just grow as a doctor, help you become the doctor you want to be and meet your educational needs. Visit the school and talk to current students. Heather, that's a good idea. That's part of the research part. Let me tell you my thoughts on this. This is going to be primarily through the secondary application, essays, and a lot of those are going to ask, why do you want to attend this particular program? And why they should want you as a part of their program. The focus is on fit here. How do you belong at this particular school? So as several of you said, first look at the school's mission and values when you're trying to address that question. And the secondary essays, if asked, or the interviews, be able to talk about your experiences and draw from your experiences the qualities that your target program values. If service to the urban underserved is a priority for the school, talk about your experience at an urban soup kitchen and how effective you were as a member of the food service team. If your target program values rural medicine, talk about your upbringing in rural, you can choose, West Virginia, Idaho, Arkansas, Alabama, Alaska, whatever it is, and your desire to settle there if true. And here I'm going to issue one of my little warnings. There's an enormous difference between mouthing platitudes and spitting back the school's website's values and showing that you share the values. The former, well, we're back to our magic tricks. It's just sleight of hand. It isn't convincing and it isn't real. However, examples in your essays, your bullet points in your resume, items in your activity history, your letters of recommendation, and responses to interview questions must demonstrate these qualities. So as several of you said, it's your ability to tie your experiences to these values. But just the values alone, don't do it. Don't cut it. One quality that is increasingly valued by medical schools is teamwork and the ability to work collaboratively. In the question window, can you give me some examples from your experience how you would show teamwork? And if I have to point to one major change, sports, excellent. Anybody else? Major change that I've seen in the last 20 years, it's a shift to focus on teamwork in medicine. Working as a residential assistant, again, if you're talking about working with other assistants as peers, that could be excellent. Volunteer project, good, Nancy. School clubs, quite possibly Jenny. Service projects, good. Working with other research associates, that could do it, Ryan. Excellent. Working in hospital with many different nurses and doctors, working on, good, Heather. Working on research team, right? Interesting, working with a group of photographers to capture an event. That's a good one, Alicia. It's a little different. Any work-related project that requires, and here, Malik, here's the thing, that requires you to work on a team. Okay, if you're working solo, it won't work. Working on an executive board to put an event together. That would work. Amanda, that'd be very good. Okay, Malik. So I think most of you have it. So you don't have to spit back phrases at all. You have to demonstrate qualities. Now, if you have professional direction or think you know which area of medicine you want to go into, check out residency placement data for your schools of interest to select schools that are strong in the direction you want to go. You can still change your mind in the course of medical school, but if your focus turns out to be your most desired residency, you may just be ahead of the game. And again, it's one more way to show fit. Now, here's for another one of my warnings. If you focus, however, on rankings and foreign rumors, that can really obscure this aspect of admissions. Med schools have among the lowest acceptance rates of any professional program. They have lots of applicants, and they can be really, really choosy. Now, Joe, when I spoke to him, getting back to our good old friend Joe, he didn't really have direction. He just knew he wanted to go to medical school, and it wasn't really clear why. He didn't know any of the school's stated or unstated values. And you kind of need to, the unstated ones you would find out by talking to other people, but sometimes by reading between the lines. And you need to know those in order to both choose the most appropriate schools for you and then convince them to accept you. So, all right, let's go through the 5 parts again. 1, show them you can do the work. 2, show them that you have a realistic view of medicine. 3, show that you have the values at this particular school, that you share the values that this particular school has. And 4, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute something to schools, to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud that they accepted you. Now, this is a little bit different from the qualities that I've been talking about up to now. 1 to 3 of the 5-part framework are really about you showing that you fit in at a particular place and that you belong, that you're in the community. This is a little different. How is it different? Anybody want to take a stab at that in the question window? Being bilingual, it could be a way that you will contribute, yes. But how is this quality different from the previous ones? How you stand out? Laura, you got it. What you bring to the table. Exactly, Teresa. It's more about your personality, about your personal experience, it's more about how you're going to, exactly, Bijay, you got it, bring something unique. It's more about what you can do for them. It's more about you bringing something unique, that you're going to add something to the class as opposed to fit in. So this is why sometimes non-traditional students have certain advantages because they can do this a little bit more easily than the traditional bio major straight from college applicant. But let's go dive into this one a little bit more. Okay? So one way to demonstrate that we'll be able to contribute in the future is to show that you've contributed in the past. And you want in your essays, your resume, your activity history, your interview, and your letters of recommendation to reveal a habit of contribution. And this is one of the reasons that community service is important. Even non-clinical community service is important, because if you've contributed to your community in some way in the past, you will probably do so in the future, both in medical school and beyond. And realize that community can be defined very, very broadly, and that's certainly how I'm using it. It could be working in a soup kitchen in a poor area of your city. It could be United Way, Kids Kicking Cancer, Teach for America, any of the organizations on the screen. It could be an ethnic community. It could be a religious or political community. It could be some kind of affinity group. The key here, though, is that assuming responsibility for something in this group is a differentiator, and it makes it much more valuable from an admissions perspective. So whether you are assuming responsibility for an event, for a fundraising campaign, for a team project where you at that point assume leadership, that is more than just showing up for Habitat for Humanity, twice, which is nice. It's good. But there's not a lot of commitment there. There's no leadership there. There is teamwork. There's not a lot of commitment and contribution there. It's more like check the box to get it done. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, non-traditional applicants who have perhaps a couple, maybe several years of work experience to draw on, maybe even a different profession before medicine, can show qualities that medical schools value and their ability to contribute in a distinctive way just by talking about the skills they've developed in their field. So for example, if you are an engineer and we're in a problem-solving mode, and many engineers are, you can apply your problem-solving skills to diagnosis and the creation of treatment plans for your patients. Or if you were a teacher, then presumably you have developed certain skills as a communicator and also as an educator that could help you in improving compliance, in training your patients and what they need to do to manage their illnesses. Or maybe you are a consultant and were a team lead or an engagement manager. Then you certainly have leadership, teamwork, and organizational skills that you can highlight. Realize that most medical schools have too many qualified applicants. Most of the people who are rejected can do the work from required in medical school, or they can show the fit. If not formally, then informally. You need to understand that medical school admissions is a two-step process. The first is evaluation, determining the qualified. Those would be the people who can show they can do the work, they have the realistic view of medicine, they show fit with the program, and they're also going to show the kinds of qualities that virtually all medical schools look for. Those are people who are qualified. But when you get to the second step, which is selection, crafting a class of committed, talented future physicians, that injects a very subjective element to the admissions or selection process. And the implication from the selection part of the process is that the school has no reason to admit someone without something distinctive to contribute or someone lacking a history of initiative, a record of past impact and contribution. Is this point clear? It's not just enough to show that you can do the work, that you fit in. It's not just enough to check the boxes. You have to show that you're going to bring something extra and distinctive to class. Diversity is valued. And I had a podcast on diversity a couple of weeks ago on different ways of thinking about diversity. Be prepared to show that, again, a record of impact and contribution, involvement, taking initiative and responsibility, as well as how you're going to add something distinctive to your class. All right, so that was number 4. Number 5, reveal the personality traits that med schools value. And this is really true, I think. What are the traits that come to mind that really every physician and every med should have and every med school wants in future physicians? Compassion, excellent. Hardworking, definitely. Leadership, resilience, good. Empathetic, excellent, trustworthy. Altruism, good. Any others come to mind? Humility is another good one for a doctor. Attention to detail, professionalism, teamwork, communication skills, both the ability to speak clearly and to listen well. Okay, you mentioned understanding, Dawn. Confidence. Well, confidence combined with humility. Erica, so you said humble, that's humility. Okay, that works. All parts of the application, the primary, the secondary, interviews, and casual interactions with medical schools should reveal these traits. I'm trying to say I'm not even trying to say, I'm going to say it really clearly. If you're arrogant to a receptionist during interview day, you probably have killed your chances at that school. Okay? That's why humility is important. Good listener, excellent, Judy. Respect for others, very good. These traits, the good ones, should come through in the stories you tell in your personal statement, the most meaningful experiences, the activity descriptions, the secondaries, the interview, both whether it's a traditional interview or MMI, multiple mini interview. Leadership is highly valued. Several of you said leadership, but teamwork is gaining and become really the flip side of that golden leadership coin, right? The ability to take initiative and responsibilities when it's appropriate, as well as to step back, perhaps follow somebody else's lead, or simply work collaboratively with several other people. Compassion and caring, empathy, absolutely required. And humility doesn't mean that you demean yourself, but it is definitely the opposite of arrogance and absolutely required for effective teamwork. Attention to detail is reflected in the care you take on your essays and even, by the way, in the boxes that you fill out on the applications, whether it's the primary or the secondary. I interviewed the Assistant Dean of Admissions at SUNY Upstate, Jennifer Welch, several months ago, and she absolutely railed against the typos and lack of punctuations that she sees on her school's very simple secondary application. Folks, this is professional school. You want to come across as a professional. This is not social media. It's not Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, or Snapchat. You have to come across as a professional. Pay attention to the details. Also, in selecting examples in your essays and interviews, choose those examples, experiences, and anecdotes that answer the question and reveal these traits, most of which are frequently reflected in med school values in one way or another. And don't make the reader think too hard. As Sydney Foote, accepted senior medical school admissions consultants, articulately laid out in her Nail Your Medical School Interview webinar, you want to explicitly weave into your anecdotes the traits you want the schools to recognize. Don't rely on them to figure it out or come to the conclusion you want them to reach. Take them with you to that conclusion. Tell them. One more way to show professionalism, commitment, discipline, and organization, all very important skills for doctors, is simply to apply early and then respond to all secondaries quickly. Now, when I say apply early, I don't mean compromise the quality of your application. I mean make sure it's ready early without compromising the quality. And I mean in terms of secondaries that can be a little bit harder, but why is this important? Well, first of all, almost every medical school admissions person I've ever spoken with says apply early. Dr. Ryan Gray from Medical School HQ on a podcast likened medical school admissions to musical chairs, and I like the metaphor and I've used it ever since. The longer you wait, the fewer chairs are available and the harder it is to grab one. So again, as much as you possibly can, try and get that application in early, and by that I mean in June. With secondaries, return them ideally within 2 weeks of receipt. And that's going to be tough because when those secondaries come out, it's like a deluge. So use the time between the submission of your primary and the arrival of the secondaries to pre-write the most common essay questions and to do research so that you know why you want to attend the specific schools you are applying to and submitting secondaries to. You also may want to use, I assume you're researching schools now as well, I would set up some kind of system whether you use Evernote or something like it, and Microsoft has something like it, and Google has something like it, where you can take notes, you can tag the notes, so if that you can have stories, schools value X, Y, and Z. You can tag them with those things, and then you can later start pre-writing some essays and tag them with the qualities that you think those stories present, and that will really save you time when it comes to the secondaries. Just be careful that when you send in secondaries, you're not sending in what was pre-written. You are making sure that you respond directly and specifically to their question and tie it to that particular school. Okay, let's go back to your goal in submitting an application. Show that you belong in medical school. We're going to have a little contest now, and the winners will get a free copy of the Definitive Guide to Pre-Medical Post-Baccalaureate Programs. If you're in the U.S., I realize we have a couple of Canadians here. If you're in the U.S., you get a choice of paperback or Kindle version. If you're outside the U.S., it's Kindle only, but again, it's free. So the first 3 people to answer the next question in the question window will get the Definitive Guide to Pre-Medical Post-Baccalaureate Programs, which is a book written by Alicia McNeeson-Namankar, acceptance consultant, former post-bac program at UC Davis. The question is, fingers poised over the keyboard, the question is, what is the first part of my 5-part framework? Okay, let's see. The first ones who got it were Alicia, Shavita, and Heather. Okay, I'm going to make a note. Rachel, you got that? That's right. Okay. Oh yeah, most of you got it. Good. All right, that's the first part. Let's look at all 5 now, go through it quickly. You want to present an academic track record showing that you can do the work. That's number 1. Number 2, you want to have had clinical experience, and you want to have direction within medicine. And that direction should be based, again, on personal experience. 3, you want to show them that you share the school's values and its mission. 4, you want to be able to demonstrate that you will contribute to class discussions, the school's community, and ultimately make them proud that they admitted you. And then you want to reveal the traits that are valued across the board in medicine. And most of you got that really, really well. Compassion, communication skills, empathy, leadership, resilience, humility was one that I mentioned. And I think we went through that pretty well. And these were the steps that I recommended to Joe when I spoke to him. Now, Joe, he had problem with them because he had a long ways to go, but we'll get to Joe again in a minute. Before I get back to Joe, I want to mention a little bonus advice to keep in mind. It's not really part of my 5-part framework, but I do want to mention it. The admissions committee readers are really sharp, intelligent professionals. They've probably heard every baloney story under the sun. Don't try to craft, fake, or fool. Present them an authentic reflection of you, keeping in mind the 5 elements of a successful medical school application. Now, I started the webinar with a story of Joe, who was just the beginning of his medical school journey. And as I said, he wasn't thrilled with all that he had to do and all the steps I told him he needed to take, but he was very appreciative of my candid suggestions and recognized the value of my guidance. I've spoken with hundreds, if not thousands, of medical school applicants like Joe, most in better shape than Joe, and like you, like Joe and sometimes like you, striving to get into medical school and stressed out at the work involved and the possibility that you may not make the cut. We here at Accepted know how difficult and stressful a process this application process can be, and we're here to help you. Your goal is to apply confidently and successfully to the best programs for you. To do so, you need the know-how supplied by experts using their expertise to benefit you. And again, my goal for this webinar was to show you that you need all 5 elements. And that's our goal as we work with you. Given the complexity of the application process and the stakes, you need a guide who knows the process inside and out and who can support you through this grueling journey. You need Accepted to be your guide. We have a customized approach that fits your needs. We're not one size fits all. You have options so that you can purchase only a little help if you need with one element of the application. then that's fine. If you are starting from scratch and want comprehensive assistance, that's fine too. We offer it. You will have one dedicated advisor who becomes expert in your story and helping you present it. And like Joe, but you'll get a lot more of it, you'll get candor and objectivity combined with decades of experience in medical school admissions. We have the admissions experts, the guides, who can mentor you through the process so that you achieve your goal of applying confidently and successfully. Our staff consists of former admissions directors, staff members, post-bac program directors, and seasoned admissions consultants who have been on the other side of the process and who can be your guide through your application process. Here's what I suggest you do. Visit www.accepted.com/primary, where you'll see the range of primary application packages, either again of the more comprehensive services. And then choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance that you need, and ultimately apply confidently and effectively. Now, some of you may say, especially after you visit the site, isn't accepted expensive? Well, you know what? So is rejection. Our fees are clear, but the cost of rejection, well, it's not quite so obvious, even though it can be significantly higher than accepted's fees. So let's take a look at the risks of not applying with accepted's assistance. Cost of reapplication can easily be several $1,000s, especially if you have to retake the MCAT or you fly out for more interviews, that kind of stuff. You also could have a year of lower earnings than after you earn your MD or DO degree. And there's also the potential that you could have gotten into a better program with greater lifetime opportunities and even earnings. So every year we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided, after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected, to work with us when they reapply. They would have been better off and saved a lot of money had they worked with us initially, and so would you. But enough from me. What do accepted clients say? Well, here's a few. This is a small sample. You can find more online from what our clients say, okay? I'm so excited and relieved to have been accepted to California school. I really appreciate all of Cheryl's help and input on my application. I felt much more confident in my personal statement after working with her. Thank you again. Or another one, I've been loving my help so far. My consultant, Dr. Herman Gordon, has been very helpful and knowledgeable. He's a former admissions director at medical school. And last on the right, I want to share my exciting news. I will be attending the University of Washington School of Medicine. I received an email from the dean saying that I am awarded a hefty scholarship. I'm feeling blessed and excited right now. I want to thank you, Alicia, for your support throughout my application. This was such a challenging process for me, but your patience and editing knowledge allowed me to express my passion for medicine. And here are a couple more. In writing my personal statement, I was having difficulty wrapping all my experiences into one concise theme, and upon talking to Jessica for the first time, I was instantly relieved. Not only that, the response time was quick. With her help, I was able to finish my essay so much faster than I had anticipated. Thank you, once again, Jessica. Or Sid, and this is the last one. Hello, Sydney. Wow, I'm so impressed. You are a genius. I can't believe how well you managed to cut my essay in half without compromising my tone or eliminating the little stories. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I could not have done it without you. There's 17 more hours left till the application is due, and I'm not stressed at all because I know I have you by my side. So again, my suggestions to you, and we're going to get to questions in a moment, is visit accepted.com/primary, choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and apply effectively. And for webinar attendees only, here's the special I promised you. We have a gift, $250 off any primary package with coupon code 316 SAVE 250. It's available today and tomorrow. And I'm going to keep this slide up so that you can jot down both the URL and the coupon code, and I'm happy to take your questions. I want to say that a couple of our consultants have joined us, and I'm very happy to have Dr. Herman Gordon join us. Now there.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. How you doing, Flash?
Good.
Okay. So I'm going to share the question and answer session with Dr. Gordon. And the question right now is, could you speak a bit about addressing a low grade in a science course? Take it away.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, the best thing is to retake the course and show that you can do the work.
Okay.
I have seen candidates with multiple poor grades in science courses still get in.
But they
Uh,
retook the class.
but they had to show some sort of redemption. so,
Okay.
so they've got to retake the course. They've got to go on in their careers and demonstrate that they can do well in other related science courses. They can't just leave it hanging there.
Okay.
And there's no way to talk your way out of it in your application.
Right. So the best thing is just to retake. By the way, folks, I was remiss. Flash, I hope you'll accept my apologies. I didn't properly introduce Dr. Gordon. He is a former head of admissions at the University of Arizona College of Medicine. He is taught in medical school, and he's also now an admissions consultant at Accepted. So, and a very popular one. I think you saw at least one of the testimonials was for him right here, the one in the lower left. Okay, let's get some more questions going. Thank you very much, Juhi, for the question, and thank you, Dr. Gordon, for your response. All right, another question here. What is the suggested GPA for science? Is it different from the overall GPA? Should it be higher? Is there an absolute number that you would suggest? Flash?
I don't suggest an absolute number, but a low grade in science versus a higher GPA elsewhere
No, I think the question really is about the science GPA. Should it be no lower than the overall average GPA for a given school? I mean, what kind of advice would you give on that?
Well, I think the big problem is once you've got the GPA, you've got it.
Yeah.
And so it's what you can do with it afterwards.
Okay,
so
what can you do it?
Medicine is an applied science, so your science grades are your most important grades.
Right. Okay. All right. Anne is asking, what's your rate of acceptance rate with clients? It's actually about 80%. Okay. And let's see, we also have a question. We have a question here from Leah, who is asking, do you have reapplicant services, or should I start with a primary package for all applicants regardless of reapplicant status? We do have a rejection review service, which you could start with, and it's less expensive than any of the primary packages. Or you could just start with the primary package, whichever you prefer. Rachel, can you post the link to the rejection review service? But thank you for the question. All right. How much shadowing clinical experience is appropriate? 20 hours, 40 hours? Dr. Gordon, what would you say to that one?
Okay, so I would agree with what you were saying before, that shadowing is okay, but it's not what's really important. It's the direct patient contact clinical experience that's important. And what reviewers like to see is a dedicated experience. So not that you've done a little of this, a little of that, but that you've really, dug into something and, put your best effort into something meaningful. So that could be like a CNA job. That actually, it may sound like it's a terrible job, but it actually sells really well to med school admissions committees because you get to know your patients. It's a situation where you can demonstrate your compassion, your ability to connect with people. The shadowing demonstrates a different aspect of your awareness of medicine. Shadowing gives you a breadth of understanding of medicine, and that's good, but as little as 20 hours might be okay in shadowing if you've got the 200 plus hours in direct patient contact.
I always think of shadowing as like a good place to start. If you're thinking of medicine and you shadow the family physician, or you shadow another doctor, and and you say, this is pretty cool. And then you go on to volunteer or be a scribe or be an EMT or have actual patient contact, then it's fine. But if that's where you stop, then I think it's really weak.
Right.
Okay. Let's see what other questions we have here. If you are applying in 2018, can we start with the primary package now, or should I wait until next year? This is from BY. We actually have what we call a pre-med package. Rachel, maybe you can post that link also, which allows you to get consistent counseling from now through 2018. Basically, you have monthly half-hour calls, up to 15, I think, with the I think it's a silver pre-med package. And so that would probably work better for you. Can you post that link also, Rachel? Okay, she just did it. So, all right. Thank you. And if you purchase that today or tomorrow, I'm not sure the coupon would work, but I would give you the $250 off. Okay, because it'll include the primary package. So if you have a problem, we'll make sure that you come out whole on that one. Okay, Vicki is asking if I'm going into my final year of my undergrad in the fall and I have a low GPA, would you suggest retaking courses I have already taken, or would you recommend taking other courses like tacking on a minor to bring up the GPA? What would you say to that one, Dr. Gordon?
Well, some schools will respond to an improving GPA.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you had a 2.9 freshman year and you've got a 3.9 senior year. Well, they're going to count the 3.9,
Mm-hmm.
even if your overall GPA doesn't look so strong. So it really depends. If you retake courses, I think you only get the credit once for the course, so that becomes much more difficult to graduate. So you could try to take, if you feel prepared, take courses which extend upon the ones that you didn't do so well in, and then demonstrate that, well, you do have that fundamental knowledge because you were able to apply it at a higher level and do well with it.
Yeah, that's great. I think the key point here is where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? If you think you can do well in new courses and obviously graduate on time, then go for that, as Dr. Gordon is saying. If you think you didn't get the foundation down and that was why you did poorly in the earlier classes, then you might have to retake and graduate a little later. But I think what would be a big mistake would be to take upper division science classes that you don't have the foundation for and do poorly in those also. Then you really would need a post-bac program to kind of recover and get back in the groove. Would you agree with
Right.
that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. My mouse moved. Here we have some questions. All right. Heather asks, I have a very high GPA, 3.95, but went to a state school. Do you think this hurts my chances? Dr. Gordon, what would you say?
I think that there are statistics out there about which school you went to versus what med school that you get to. And it's certainly true, so if you go to Harvard versus a state school, it will improve your chances of getting into med school. And the other, going to the state school does not condemn you to not getting into med school. There are, probably most of the people in med school right now went to a state school.
Right.
And it's, your 3.95 is excellent. They're going to want to see beyond the metrics, to see your clinical preparation and what kind of person you are. That's what's going to end up being the most important.
Right. Now here's a very interesting question. A friend of mine scored in the 100th percentile on the MCAT and had a high GPA, but didn't get many interviews. Any idea why? You want to take that?
I've seen many cases like that. And it's usually one of two reasons. One is they don't have any clinical experience,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is they've got a bad letter of reference.
Uh-huh. The
Yeah,
other
so
thing,
what med schools are really worried about are the jerks.
right.
So these are people who are arrogant and just are not going to be good doctors. They don't care how smart they are. If they're a jerk, they don't want them.
That's right. Arrogance. They're cocky. They feel that their 100% MCAT entitles them to medical school acceptance, and it comes through. And when I said during the webinar, I don't know exactly at what point you came on, at one point I said that if on interview day you are rude to a janitor or receptionist, you have probably just killed your chances of acceptance at that school. I don't
Yeah, I
care.
think a lot of candidates aren't aware that it's a 360 on the day that they're there on campus. And what that means is that everybody who they interact with can report to the admissions committee. So that means other students, that means people in the admissions office.
Yeah. And again, if you are rude, impatient, or arrogant, or cocky, too confident, forget it. You've just thrown out everything that you did to try and get into medical school. So the individual who had the super high MCAT and the great GPA perhaps had an attitude problem, or as Flash said, didn't have the clinical. If he's a perfectly nice fellow. Okay, let's take another question. If you are training to be an EMT in the summer to work as an EMT in the fall, will that still help your overall application? What would you say?
Yes. So the problem is people who take EMT courses and never use
Yeah.
their credential. So it's fine, so you've taken the course and you're about to you're about to apply it. So that's great. You'll want to include that in a letter of update if you're doing it in the fall, during the height of admission season.
I would hope that you would have some of that kind of clinical exposure before you apply.
Yes.
I think that would be preferable. Obviously, if you don't have it, the next best thing is to do what you're talking about doing, which is getting it in the fall. If you get in, great. If you don't get in, you'll be better positioned to reapply next summer. But, they will consider it. It just won't be quite as good as for the people who've been doing it for a year or months or whatever. Okay. Let's see another question. All right. Can you talk to me about the importance of research? I would say that depends on the school. What do you say, Flash?
It depends on the school and it depends on what you want to do with your career in medicine. So you do not have to have research to get into med school.
Right.
You do have to have clinical exposure.
Right. I've been told that over and over and over again. Now, there are some programs, I think, where research is really important. So,
Right.
those programs, it's different.
Right. Stanford, WashU, Duke.
Right. Yeah, I think Johns Hopkins also, the research-oriented schools.
Right.
Okay, here's an interesting question. I'm a mom of 3 kids. Should I be prepared for more thorough questions? Dawn, do you mean questions like about how you're going to cope with medical school and your home life, your home responsibilities? Is that what you're referring to? Yes. I would say you should be prepared for them in interviews. What would you say?
I know at the University of Arizona that they're not allowed to ask you about that.
I've heard from clients that they have. Not specifically at the University of Arizona, but
right.
I have heard about it.
Right, and that's kind of unfortunate. It may be telling you that that's not the med school for you.
Right, true too. Okay.
So
yeah, go ahead.
There are med schools that are prepared to support you.
Mm-hmm.
You want to look for those.
Right, right. Yeah, Dawn is
rather
also
than
going, yeah,
yeah, rather than the ones who are going to say, oh, well, you got 3 kids and you're a mom, there's no way you're going to survive, right? You don't want that med school. You want a school that says, okay, you're a mom with 3 kids, we've got these support services.
that's true. Excellent point. Okay. Let's see, I'll take one more question, and then I think we're going to call it a day. Okay, so do you recommend a gap year? Should I take a gap year in order to improve my GPA? Alicia, what is your GPA? Hold on a second. We'll get that in a minute. 3.0. What would you say? Obviously, it's hard to answer in a vacuum, okay? One of the points I tried to make in my webinar was that you need to have all 5 elements. So I would probably say if you had a super high MCAT and a rising trend in your GPA, then maybe try to apply now. You also may want to consider DO schools. But if you want allopathic medical schools and you have a 3.0 and that GPA, especially the last year, is not really, really high and your MCAT isn't really, really strong, then I would probably recommend a post-bac. Dr. Gordon, what do you say?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right. With that, I have a final story and a thought for you. I want to, first of all, thank you very much for your time, your answers, your questions, your participation. I want to thank Dr. Herman Gordon for joining me for the Q&A. I really appreciate it. And I want to wish you all good luck with your application. Here's the final story. We had a client last year named Sally. She is an Asian American she actually had good stats and a competitive but fairly typical profile. Her results after working with Accepted: out of 20 secondaries, she was invited to 18 interviews. She went to 11, was accepted to 5, and waitlisted at 4. Well, obviously, Sally's results were great and the most obvious benefit of working with Accepted. There was another one, a little bit less tangible, but no less important. Sally was more confident throughout the process, and I think that came through on the testimonials that I showed. She was less anxious, even during her interviews, and she considers herself an introvert, and admitted to being very nervous about the interviews before she worked with Accepted.com consultant Sydney Foote. Final thought, and again, I've tried to emphasize this throughout. All 5 parts of the framework that I listed are necessary for a successful medical school application. It's not 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 that will do. You need all 5. Our clients have the 5, just like Sally did, and you can too. Once again, good luck with your applications. Have a very good evening. Please jot down the URL, in particular the coupon code, because we're not going to be sharing that other than in this webinar. You can use it today and tomorrow. Good luck. Have a good evening. And again, thank you, Herman, for joining me.
You're very welcome, and good luck to everyone.